Namaste. How do you like the stage? Good job, huh? Thank you for Dilip and team, Salt March Media. Thank you also to Randstad for their sponsorship. Without having a sponsor, it's a lot more difficult to put on an event like this. And thank you all for attending. Without you, we wouldn't have an event. You know, I'd be just standing here by myself, talking to an empty room, which might be fun, but not quite the same. So this is my first time traveling out to India. Actually, I've been close by. I've been to Singapore a couple of times, but I never ended up coming up here. So this has been a dream for me for many years. My partner Rob and I have been talking about coming out here for about 5 years, and we finally identified a very good partnership that was able to make it possible. Also would like to give a special thanks to all of the speakers and Sarang Brahm, I hope I pronounced your name okay, who helped us with a lot of the logistics and figuring things out. So, some of you might not know that I am actually an honorary Indian. Did you know that? My middle name is Ananda. For real. That's what it says on my passport anyway. I never use it, but, you know, I just go by Shally. So, I wanted to start today with just giving you some highlights on where sourcing is going. I first started talking about and evangelizing sourcing 18 years ago, and was one of the first, arguably some people will say the first, to actually do sourcing as a full-time job, where nobody else was doing it. In fact, quite a few people, particularly in my office, would laugh at me, because that's all I did, was sourcing. And I used to bring my resumes on a floppy disk, from home, because they didn't allow us to use the internet at work. But they stopped laughing after I broke 11 company records in placements and margins and numbers of consultants billable. So that kind of started this trend. Then I discovered I had a passion for teaching. I had a passion for communicating my knowledge to others. It's partly why I joined the US Peace Corps and did a tour in Central America. But ever since, even before that, I always liked explaining things to others. So you put those two together, my sheer laziness as a recruiter and not wanting to do things the way everybody else had done them, which is the traditional way, and my propensity for talking a lot, which is how I ended up becoming a teacher, and we end up with this today. To me, this is a very proud moment. I believe that India is a leading edge indicator of what's to come in world business. Many people in business world refer to BRIC, Brazil, Russia, India, and China as the sort of the evolving markets, the next generation of the markets. But I believe that India was first in outsourcing and will be first also in this business as well as we start to expand sourcing to a global model. So for me, this is a dream come true in a couple of ways. First, I get to visit India, my home country, at least for my middle name anyway. And I also get to finally realize the dream of seeing sourcing grow up. And that's why we are here today, because you are part of sourcing growing up. We had the teenage years, 2009, 2010, where we would come home drunk, had lots of acne, be very rebellious, and we used to live in the basement. You know, they would feed us pizza under the door. But then we started becoming more professional, and now it's a legitimate job. Most of you in this room have or know someone who has the title sourcing somewhere in their job description. Either, you know, talent sourcing or sourcing recruiting or something like that. 18 years ago, that didn't exist. So again, very proud moment for me. Let me give you a quick overview of the industry. This is me, blah, blah, blah. My phone number's here if you want it. I want to start my tour by telling you that recruiting lacks a definition. There's no real good definition for recruiting. Mind you, there's no real good definition for sourcing either. But I'll get to that in just a minute. The first one is to define recruiting. My favorite, if you look in the dictionary, it'll tell you that to recruit is to replenish, maintain, increase, or maintain or increase the talent ranks of an organization. Pause for that second and realize what that says. Replenish, maintain, or increase the talent ranks of an organization. Folks, this is as crucial as it gets. This is the single most important, most valuable role in any organization that is looking to attain growth. Even in companies that are not growing, they lose employees through normal attrition, and they must find new talent to replenish or maintain. So I want you to think about, as you leave this conference today, it may not feel like it right now, but sourcing is a gateway for recruitment to finally break through into strategy, for recruiting to finally be strategic. Up until now, recruiting was very much responsive. Open rec, find candidates, fill job, or whatever, repeats ad nauseum. With sourcing, we now have an opportunity to think strategically and connect to business objectives. Today, you'll hear Dalbir Singh from Microsoft connect the dots. You'll hear Mr. Upalurti from Randstad connect the dots. You'll hear presentations from a variety of other people who have built the teams with or without support from leadership. But the key to remember is that we are a very crucial part of an organization's growth. Without people, companies can't grow anymore. We don't live in an era where machines do all the work. We've already gone past the Industrial Revolution. In fact, the 1800s, 1900s Industrial Revolution, most of those business concepts are obsolete, yet we still do recruiting the same way as they did in the 1800s. Let me explain. In the beginning, the first recruiter, I like that you're laughing. You're the only one that's laughing. It's okay to laugh. In the beginning, the first recruiter recruited by going clunk. Here you go, you're mine. I'm driving you back to my cave. Then at around 150 BC, we invented smoke signals so we can communicate. I need more people, please send people. Then we have the town crier, the bellman, right? Ringing the bell, announcing job openings at the baker. Baker's looking for an apprentice. They would get a sixpence or a shilling to make the announcement. That was recruiting, by the way. Then we had help wanted signs with the proliferation of literacy as people were able to read signs at the local exchanges and post office. Then we had the printing press, which pretty much established itself right around that time, but it took a great many years, about 300 years, for the printing press to get cheap enough where we could produce or mass produce newspaper, and then come, of course, classified ads. The same help wanted, the same now hiring, but many more copies and delivered to your door so you can wrap your sandwich with it. Really? No, nobody? Come on. Don't you guys wrap your sandwich with newspaper? No? No, you all get your news on the internet these days, right? Then we have, coming straight down, the telegraph. Let me skip forward and tell you, since 1830, since the invention of the telegraph, not much has changed. Let me explain. The telegraph uses Morse code. Beep, 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 zeros and ones. Fast forward, the internet. Just a lot more of it, right? But it's still beep, 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 beep. We have, 50 years later, the telephone. Hey, send more people. I need to have more people on my railroad. I need more people for my laundry. I need more people for, right? We had, with the invention of the telephone, we had people moving from one city to the other to find work. A lot more migratory jobs being available in different cities, people moving from job to job. Then the telex, and quickly after that, the fax. Did you know the first fax was in 1960? It was a wireless image. It was the first time a wireless image was sent. And the technology that we used in 1960 to send the fax is the same technology we use today to send all of your texts and selfies. It's the same technology, just much faster. Then we had the first email. Hello, 1972. Then in 1993, the internet. And in 1994, Shally. Just kidding. After that, 1999, the first text message, which was a better way of sending email. And then we had social media, which started in 2004, but really didn't explode until very recently. Now we have, anybody want to take a guess? How many social networks do you think I'm currently tracking as part of the curriculum that I do for the Sourcing Institute. There's more than the number that I'm tracking, but take a guess how many you think I'm tracking on a regular basis to see how they evolve. Give me a number. It's okay to speak. 15 or 50? Can we get a higher number? 50 going once, 50 going twice? Can we get 70, 75, 150, 151, 152? No? 200, sold! I'm tracking 250 currently, and that's just social networks that I find may have some potential value. There's a lot of others that don't apply because they're for children, for example, or in very specific segments, like for music, where there might not be a lot of recruiting activity. And then you have, of course, the modern sourcer with their iPad or tablet. I'm not really sure if that's an Android or iOS. It's kind of hard to tell from this angle. If you turned around a little bit, maybe. So that's how we evolved. The conventional way, job is opened. Oops, we got to hire somebody. Really? So when that person was given a raise and a promotion 6 months ago, you didn't think they were eventually going to take the job that they were promoted to. You didn't think that somehow you're going to have to fill that vacancy as that person got promoted. So all of a sudden, now you need to hire somebody? That's traditional. That's industrial age. Vacancy exists. Oh, scramble. Let's go recruit. Let's filter candidates. Let's review resumes. Let's reject the hell out of people. Let's just say no to 99.999% of the 100,000 resumes that come in for that position. Then, the nimble employers, the ones that can react quickly, get the pick of the litter. They get the cream of the crop, creme de la creme, because they don't have to go through this conventional industrial age process. What ends up happening? Hiring managers must compromise. They're left with selecting from what's available, not from the best talent, but from what happens to be left over after Google and Facebook hired everybody. In case you haven't noticed, I have a very specific sense of humor, and it is what it is. So I put myself out there. If you like it, great. If you don't, oops, sorry. Progressive methods are sourcing. We know where the good talent is. We post, but we post strategically, and we search at the same time. We don't have to wait until the posting closes. We can post and search, but we post to 70 different places that all have 100 members instead of one place that had 100 million members. We don't have a billboard that's viewable from the highway. We have a little tiny sign at the cafeteria where the people who do the job that we want to recruit for work. Very different. We proactively go out and look for them. We use the right keywords. Very important. We'll talk about that several times throughout your day today. And we reach out to them before they go somewhere else. The concept here is very simple. If I hire you before you reach your highest potential, I pay less for you. Period. End of story. I win. The other guy waits until you've reached your potential and then pays you a ton more. And by then, you've already been there, done that. You don't work as hard anymore. So I'm paying a lot more for a tired old, I don't want to do this anymore, person. And the nimble employers are paying a lot less for the person who's going to invent the next iPhone at $20,000 a year. Think about it. I mean, really think about it. I mean, take this home, sleep on it, and think about it. This is sourcing. This is what we do. If you don't do this, you're recruiting. And recruiting doesn't work anymore. CEOs hate recruiting. In fact, most people hate recruiting. If you ask the general public what they think about recruiting, especially those that are not in HR, if you ask someone who maybe you know socially that doesn't have any idea about the IT market or recruiting or HR, and you ask them, what do you think of recruiting? more than likely, they're going to associate recruiting with death. Ask them. Recruiting, conscription, military, combat, death. But sourcing is key in many industries. Sourcing is key in manufacturing, in supply management, sourcing for information, sourcing for product to buy, sourcing for product to sell. So why haven't we done that in our industry? That's where the future is. In my travels, I've worked with over 300 global companies, Microsoft, Google, Cisco, Motorola, a few of those. And since then, I've been advising and working with companies like Walmart and AIG, Honeywell. I'm currently working on a project with Randstad. And there's a lot of different models out there, but they boil down to 4 primary recruitment organization types. And this evolves from left to right. It's rare to see an organization skip one of these evolutionary steps. However, it's common to see organizations employ 2 or 3 of these models simultaneously, particularly because of acquisition. In other words, we were a young startup, we made a ton of money, we bought this old other company, and we had Model 3 and they had Model 2, so now we have both. That happens. The evolution starts on the left, defensive. Defensive recruitment models are what? Heads down. I don't want to get a rec. The last thing I want to do is confront a hiring manager. I'm hiding from my requisitions. Okay? Employee referrals, events, career portals, responding to ads. The next evolution is responsive. I try to get ahead of the problem. I try to maybe be a little bit more of a partner with the business. I'm a little bit more knowledgeable. There's specialized job distribution. There's strategic initiatives like SEM and SEO, pay-per-click, contextual ads, things like that. But I'm still kind of reactive. Rec opens, I work on it. Then we have anticipative, also reactive, because you're anticipating it, and when the trigger happens, rec opens, then you come into action. It's still reactive, but you are pipelining talent ahead of demand. You get to know the people in the sector. You understand the business. You know who some of the candidates are, even though you might not be recruiting them. You might have a nice Rolodex. Is Rolodex a term that translates here? Kind of a contact book. You might have a book of contacts of people that are not necessarily candidates. They're potentially in the future candidates. You have high-octane power recruiters, the ones that can, go out there and just work the phone and call everybody, and within a 24-hour period, they've got a candidate. Then you have the evolutionary step of proactive. So we have reactive, 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 proactive. Proactive recruiting is non-employee referrals. It's silver medalists. It's a crime, really, when a recruiter doesn't look inside of their own applicant tracking system for candidates that might have already applied. It's a crime. There's a lot of good talent in your database that's being passed over because they were the second choice for rec number 7345821. But they were the second choice because the other candidate had one particular skill that was unique for that particular rec. This candidate, the silver medalist, was still very good, and the hiring manager had a tough time deciding who to pick, but they could only hire one person, so they hired candidate number 1. Candidate number 2 is forever shunned and blacklisted, never to be looked at again, because they've been rejected. Let's throw them out in the garbage, because they were only number 2. What about number 3? What about the candidates who interviewed and the hiring manager said, we like him, bring him back for another interview, and by then they already got a job? Or something happened with the family? What about the ones that declined the offer? We made them an offer, which means we wanted to hire them, but something else happened and they didn't come on board. Aren't those still good candidates? Yeah. Instead, traditional recruiting is, let's post the rec and get a whole bunch of unqualified applicants so that we can filter, review, select, screen, and reject, only to end up again over here. Conventional hiring is the outdated industrial age model. Some people refer to it as post and pray. I don't like that term. Personally, I prefer pay and spray. Pay and spray the job everywhere. Shh, everybody gets to see this job. Don't be surprised when 101,000 applicants apply that have no qualifications. They don't even meet the minimum requirements. Contemporary hiring works, but it's hard work. The average recruiter works 40 hours a week sourcing and 40 hours a week recruiting on the same week. There's a lot of burnout. There's a lot of recruiters that say, oh, the hell with this, I'm done. I can't take this anymore. Cutting-edge hiring is forward-thinking, pipeline-based. But there's a problem with pipelines. We can't keep all the candidates warm in our pipeline. So there's another alternative. And it's not building a pipeline and stuffing it full of candidates that are ready to be hired. It's knowing where the candidates are and how to get to them. See, you don't need to build the pipeline if you know how to get to them quickly and effectively. The problem is you don't know where they are. So traditional recruiting is, let's advertise and hopefully they can find us. Modern sourcing is, we go to them. Doesn't mean we don't advertise. We just go to them first. Oops. Wrong one. Conventional models fail in other areas as well. Besides the large inbound volume of applicants, they also have a lot of the work shifted to the candidate. The candidate has to follow through. The candidate has to fulfill a 45-minute long application process. Then they have to do a phone interview, and then a phone screen, then a phone interview, then another interview. Then they have to come in for a face-to-face interview. Then they have to fill out an application, and then they have to do a background check, etc. The recruiter doesn't do very much work compared to what the candidate has to do in order to get the job. And as we know now, it's a supply economy in that the candidates have a choice. So when they're faced with all these insurmountable obstacles like applications and interviews, and instead they have an offer from another company that didn't do that, guess where they're going to go? We also have control in the hand of external forces. We don't have control over recruiting ourselves. We're literally hoping that the world sees our jobs and comes to us. We're relinquishing control to them. The long application process, the screening, the background checking, the fact that we throw away silver medalists, which is a lot of waste, and the fact that the supply market moves very quickly. So they don't even really have time to fill out an application. Now we have progressive forms. Most people that want to buy a product, all they do, if at all, is leave their email address. And then later when they come back, they drop their name, they connect their LinkedIn profile or their Twitter or whatever, and then the brand begins to build a map of that customer. They're not asking the customer to fill out a 10-page long interest form. They're building the map behind the scenes. That's the future. Harry Truman was one of America's greatest presidents, and he had a quote that I'm very fond of. It's amazing how much you can accomplish when it doesn't matter who gets the credit. In recruiting, often we get caught up with whose rec is it? Is it the recruiter? Is it the sourcer? Let me tell you, the hiring manager wants to hire. The recruiter wants to hire. The sourcer wants to hire. It's the same objective. So who cares? Management cares because they want to know if you've performed better this year than last year, if you're getting better at your job. Great, let's measure that. But we don't need to measure that by counting the number of hires, because as a recruiter, if I'm being measured by the number of hires, my incentive, my economic incentive, is to make as many hires as I can, which means I'm going to make the easiest hires, the fastest hires first. I'm going to focus on the easy recs, on the non-critical recs, which leaves us, sourcers, with the really challenging recs. And then our leadership comes to the sourcing team and goes, you're not making as many hires as the recruiters are. You suck. The recruiters and the sourcer role, both, just like the hiring manager, have the same objective. But the recruiter focuses on the responsibilities, what the person has to do in the job, the environment. The sourcer focuses on the skills, the qualifications. Can this person do this job? Not are they a fit for the company, not are they going to be able to, are they going to be a good hire, and all those other things. The pipeline, from a recruiter point of view, the pipeline is developed into a hire. They work the pipeline. From the sourcing point of view, they build it, or, as I introduced to you today, they know how to find it. See, other people have already built pipelines, and they're not secure. There's nothing wrong with us finding their pipeline, right? Give you a good example. You don't need to build your own LinkedIn group. If you can find somebody else's already existing, very well built, happily engaged LinkedIn group that you can hijack. They already did all the work for you. Right? Why build your own from scratch and compete with the other 700 million LinkedIn groups that have 2 members? The perspective of the recruiter is the coach, the business partner, the sourcer, special teams, specialized functions. It's an evolution, just like every other field in corporate endeavor. Law, marketing, HR. There used to be an HR generalist. Now there's payroll, benefits, right? There used to be a chief legal counsel. Now there's intellectual property, litigation, union negotiation. There used to be a marketing person. Now there's direct marketing, marketing intelligence, business intelligence, advertising. There used to be a recruiter. Now there's a sourcer. Get it? All right. The candidate is closed by the recruiter, but found by the sourcer. That's the difference. Sourcers find people, recruiters close them into hires. Now, does that mean that you can do both? Yeah, you can find them and close them. But what does that mean? You're a recruiter that sources. We're a sourcer that recruits. You're specialized. You have a higher degree of specialization because you can do both jobs. If you can only do one, you're not specialized. The competencies are slightly different. In 18 years of doing this, being arguably one of the original sourcers, I can tell you that to be a sourcer, to be a good sourcer, you must be intuitive by nature. Make logical leaps. See patterns where others don't. See relationships that are only superficial. Macro commonalities, not micro commonalities. If you can identify macro commonalities between objects and relationships, you're probably going to be a better sourcer. If you're systematic, you're a better recruiter. Recruiters follow process. It's their own process. They tend not to follow whatever process is prescribed by the employer. In fact, very obstinately so. But they have their own process that they do over and over again. That's a recruiter. Recruiters are good at setting expectations, at managing processes, at getting insight from the hiring manager about the business and the business needs, fit, environment. They're good at evaluating whether or not this person might be successful for the job. The best recruiters submit one candidate and get one hire. It's rare, but it happens. Submittal ratios of 2-to-1 and 3-to-1 are where the recruiters that are the best recruiters exist. They're also good communicators. They're negotiators. They're diplomats. Whereas the sourcer may not be as much of a diplomat. They're a little bit more self-assured. They don't need reassurance from external environments. They're more driven, perhaps secretly so, behind the scenes. They're more driven. It's not like they go out in public and show that, but inside, they're self-assured. They're very curious, and they learn easily. You know how I know that they learn easily? Because you're here. Because I never taught any of you directly, but you have all learned from me on your own. How is that? You went out and sought the information. Your colleagues, the recruiters, aren't here because they didn't do that. It's the same information that you found, they didn't find. That separates you from them. Even if you call yourself a recruiter right now, that's okay. Sourcers are problem solvers, and they have a very strong tenacity, ability to just not give up on a problem. There's a couple of other things that I wanted to show you, but I think we have maybe a minute left. Where's my timekeeper? 1 minute? Okay. Counting down. 59, 58. 50. You'll get this on the slides, so I'm not going to read this to you, but here's some bullet points to help you sell the concept of proactive sourcing to an organization that's still stuck in traditional industrial age recruiting practices. These are talking points, if you will, that you'll get a copy of. What I wanted to get to, most importantly, is the definition of sourcing. So I started the presentation with the definition of recruiting. I see it fitting that we end with the definition of sourcing. Sourcing is a specialized discipline of proactively identifying and engaging, sometimes both, sometimes just one, proactively identifying and engaging with talent that isn't in the mainstream. And what's happening is more and more talent isn't in the mainstream. Fewer people are following the mainstream. Social media has disintermediated the mainstream. It's made it possible so that people with very specific interests can connect with very specific communities. If you happen to be a big fan of a particular model of Nike shoe, there's probably a Facebook group, a Twitter account, and a LinkedIn group, and maybe several 100,000 pages dedicated to just that very unique interest. So that's what's happening with everything. Sourcing is really comprised of two things, primary research and secondary research. I think one of your speakers later on is going to cover this a little bit more in detail, but I just wanted to differentiate the two. Primary research really means this: you obtained it from the source. It could be you talked to somebody, or it could be you read something that they wrote, which could be, for example, a social media profile. That's still primary. There's a misconception that internet research is secondary. It is not. If I find your LinkedIn profile where you talk about what you do, I'm getting it from the source, vis-a-vis primary. Okay? Secondary means I heard somebody else tell me, or I got it secondhand. That's the difference. So both of those fall under sourcing. One requires a different skill set than the other. Telephone sourcing falls under the first one, because you're usually calling somebody and asking them directly. But there's secondary research in telephone sourcing too. I might call Dalbert and ask him for the names of his colleagues. That's secondhand. I'm not calling those people directly. So primary and secondary are hand in hand, but they are very different. So you're going to have quite a few different opinions about sourcing and recruiting and strategy and operations and tactics. The day is going to be divided into 3 tracks, with the exception of the after lunch presentation. There'll be a room A and a room B. One of them will be more strategic. The other one will be more operational. And then the sourcing lab will be much more tactical. So if you want to learn how to do stuff, you go to the lab. If you want to learn big picture, you go to track A, which will be in this room. If you want to learn about operations, more often than not, that'll be track B. And don't feel bad about going from one session to the other, because if you're listening to a topic and it doesn't suit your needs, go to the other session. The labs are twice per hour, so it's possible that you might attend a lab and still catch the first half or latter half of one of the keynote presentations. And I'm going to be around as much as possible, so if you want to come by, we'll have a booth at the entrance there if you want to come by and say hello. Otherwise, enjoy. Have a good time.